Hi, my name's Eric, and I'll be reading you selections from the e-edition of today's Cape Cod Times, dated Monday, April 14th of 2025. We'll start with the weather, as we always do, and across the Cape and Islands today, sunny to partly cloudy and milder weather expected. A high of 56 and some sunshine. Tonight, cloudy with a couple of showers later, low of 43. Clearing and breezy tomorrow with some showers occasionally, high of 54, low of 40. On Wednesday, mostly cloudy, high of 50, low of 36 in the overnight. Same thing on Thursday, partly sunny, high of 55, low of 36 in the overnight. And on Friday, sun through high clouds, high of 54, low of 45. So those really unusually chilly temperatures of the last week are disappearing. We are, getting sprinkles regularly, April showers as expected, and we look to have a decent week ahead of us with temps in the 50s and overnight mainly in the 40s. The sun will rise at 6:03 a.m. today. It'll set at 7:21 p.m. We'll have 13 hours and 18 minutes of daylight. Heading to the front of the paper, where the lottery results are kept, and the news, of course. We read these lottery results because, somebody asked for them. If there's something you would like read to people who are blind or print disabled, you can email us at info@audiblelocalledger.org or call us at 508-539-2030 and we'll consider reading it. And if you miss any of the information that we share in our readings, phone numbers, web addresses, things like that, email addresses and information, you can always go to audiblelocalledger.org. It's a fully disability-compliant website. Click on the Listen tab, and you can catch up on anything that we might have read in the past week. Also up there is a wide variety of periodicals and literature for your listening pleasure, as well as our shopping guides, the grocery guides, so you'll know what's on sale at the supermarket. All of that is free for people who are blind or print disabled at audiblelocalledger.org. For the latest lottery results, we go to the masslottery.com site because the Cape Cod Times goes to press too early to give you them. And if you ask for them, you certainly deserve the latest results. So for the numbers game of Sunday, April 13th, in the midday drawing, those results were 1, 8, 2, 3. Again, yesterday's midday drawing numbers game results, 1, 8, 2, 3. In the evening drawing of the numbers game yesterday, the numbers were 8, 8, 1, 8. Again, last night's evening drawing numbers game results, 8, 8, 1, 8. Mass cash for Sunday, April 13th, 3, 12, 15, 20, and 31. And Lucky for Life rounds out our lottery results for Sunday, April 13th with 2, 29, 30, 43, and 45, with 9, the bonus ball. Good luck to all who play. Remember us if you win. Now, on the front page of today's Cape Cod Times of Monday, the 14th of April, the headline reads, "The Ugly Underside of Bridges Over Bass River" by Susan Vaughn. Every day, thousands of motorists drive over the two bridges on Route 6 crossing over Bass River between Yarmouth and Dennis. But fewer people, mostly boaters, have been under them. The motorists would be shocked at what they see, as a group of us were during a motorboat ride April 10th from a Yarmouth port boat landing on Fallens Pond across to Kelly's Bay and under the eastbound and westbound highway bridges over the headwaters of Bass River. They would see rotten wooden pilings, missing diagonal boards that are supposed to hold the pilings together, sheared off or missing pilings from the concrete base, rusted rebar, crumbling concrete, and clear marks along the concrete showing where water drips down from the road above. It's an issue that needs to be understood by the community. Rick Bishop, executive director of Friends of Bass River, who organized the tour, said after the ride, "There are a lot of projects that need attention. Bishop and our pilot, commercial fisherman Joel Boyce of Yarmouth Port, who would both spend a lot of time on the pond and river, pointed out the crumbling bridge infrastructure. Bob Keary, communications director for State Senator Julian Cyr, Democrat from Truro, also joined the Cape Cod Times on the boat ride and will report back to Cyr what he observed. Keary said the senator gets many requests daily for money for Cape projects. As we rode under the bridges several times, Bishop pointed out at least 7 large concrete and broken steel pipes that spew runoff from the bridges into the waters below. Who knows what's in it, he said. Even if the pilings were shored up, Bishop said, there are serious worm problems that could prevent them from standing. The westbound bridge is in the worst shape, he said. The 2 bridges were built between 1966 and 1971 when Route 6 was expanded to 4 lanes to Route 134 in Dennis, according to a state report on the history of Route 6. When were the bridges inspected? They were inspected April 29th of 2024, according to a listing of Mass Department of Transportation bridge inspections. But the results of the inspections aren't reported, and Bishop said he didn't get the results. He referred to the recent ceiling collapse inside the Prudential Tunnel in Boston as a similar serious situation. Bishop said the High Bank Bridge over Bass River is still in pretty good shape. The Bass River Bridge over Route 28 between South Yarmouth and West Dennis is long overdue to be replaced. That project will start in September, Bishop said. Bishop said friends of Bass River think of themselves as the voice of Bass River, as no one else is advocating for it. With 1,800 members, the Friends monitor the river. They provide education and help get restoration projects. The organization was awarded $4.7 million last spring for the Upper Bass River Restoration Project that will return 57.2 acres of cranberry bogs to wetlands north of the Bass River and Yarmouth. Another project replacing undersized culverts on Crowell Pond will improve the habitat and reduce nitrogen loading. I believe that's supposed to be habitat. Will improve the habitat and reduce nitrogen loading. Yarmouth and Dennis are partnering on these projects, Bishop said. To learn more, you can check on friendsofbassriver.org. From our guides, we also got more education about the river Fallens Pond. Bass River is believed to be the longest intertidal river in the state at 7.1 miles from the mouth to Mill Pond, Bishop said. Boys also pulled up the large yellow Chesapeake boring sponges from Fallens Pond that attach and eat away shellfish he's trying to catch. There are enough sponges that he could fill a whole boatload with every day, he said. The next headline on the cover of today's Cape Cod Times: Iconic columns in West Dennis converted into housing, by Zane Razak in West Dennis. Leanne Cowgill remembers being inside the historic Greek Revival mansion years ago when it was a glittering jazz club. The large building with tall fluted columns along busy Route 28 was built by Captain Obed Baker in 1861. Since then, the Columns, as it's known, has been a home, a hotel, a boarding house, and a nightclub. It fell into disrepair after standing empty beginning in the 1980s. I would drive by this place, and it was empty and rotting, and it's just sad, said Cowgill, then corrected herself. It was sad. Not anymore. On Thursday afternoon, Cowgill of Harwich was one of dozens who attended an open house to see the iconic building's long-awaited transformation. The main house now features 5 1- and 2-bedroom condos, with 2 restricted for low-income residents. Next up, we'll be building 5 duplexes and 1 freestanding house with 11 units, including 2 affordable that ring the main building on 3 sides. Tim McElroy of Sandwich and Lindsay and Mike Weiss, who are seasonal residents of Sandwich, have worked together for about 7 years developing houses on the Cape. They always admired the Columns. It's one of those buildings you can't help but notice has a presence, a story, said Lindsay Weiss. They watched as the property passed through a series of owners with failed ideas to revive it. When it became available again, Lindsay Weiss said it felt meant to be, and they decided to seize the opportunity. Over the past 3 years, they've been breathing new life into the property. McElroy said public curiosity about the building bubbled over. Fencing went up to keep the project safe during construction. "It's a landmark for the town," said McElroy. "Everyone was just excited to see it being worked on. We would get people just stopping in, and sometimes they'd walk right in the front door." Retaining the old columns look. Outside the house, Dennis Historical Commission chairwoman Diane Rochelle said the house is so close to the original in some ways and so contemporary in other ways. She pointed to the columns, which originally only rose one story. After Captain Obed Baker, his daughter, decided to rebuild the columns and push them above the second floor into the roof. "So you really have a bridge over centuries," said Rochelle. "Salvaging and replicating the ornamental woodwork that tops the trim of the house outside was one of the most challenging parts of the restoration," said master craftsman John Cisco, noting the substantial rot. "Meanwhile, reviving the original winding staircase was a cosmetic restoration," he said. "It just needed to be cleaned up and refinished. It was rock solid on day one, and it still is," said Cisco. Over the course of the project, a letter from 1879 was discovered tucked above the ceiling on the third floor. Cisco said they believe the letter was written by a servant who used to work at the property. "My dear friend Annie, I take my pen in hand to answer your letter, which I received last week, and was glad to hear from you, and that you are well as this leaves me at present," reads the letter, now framed on the lobby's wall. The note continues, "I don't have much news to write. I have not heard anything from Florence, only what you have said, as I have not wrote to her since I left Malden, but I would write her if I thought she would send me those $2 she owes me." Two historic inscriptions were also preserved. One was hidden behind the plaster of a second-floor bedroom and reads Isaiah Ellis, "Gone to war, September 9th, 1861. Isaiah Ellis, born in Dennis in 1839, was a 22-year-old mason working at the columns plastering interior walls, according to the Dennis Historical Commission. It's not immediately clear why he scribbled this down. Ellis himself fought in the Civil War, enlisting in 1863. A second hidden note that reads, "Jeff Davis, September 5th, 1861, died," was saved behind another bedroom wall. Cisco believes this is a reference to Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederate States, from 1861 to 1865. While he died in 1889, Cisco said the New York Times on September 5th of 1861 reported on rumors of his death, but later confirmed he was still alive. Both inscriptions are now framed in their rooms. Building a community. Each unit has its own heat pump for heating and cooling. During guided tours on Thursday, attendees explored some of the unit's outdoor patios. In a nod to the property's past as a jazz club, Lindsay Weiss said each unit will have a wine locker. "That's kind of been our ethos here. We're building a community, not just condos. So we're going to have a community garden, community bicycles, and a fire pit outside," said McElroy. The lottery deadline is May 16th. The deadline to apply for the affordable units in the main house is May 16th by 5 p.m. One unit has one bedroom and 1.5 baths, and it's priced at $186,000 with a monthly $260 Homeowners Association fee, according to Housing Association Corporation. The other affordable unit has 2 bedrooms and 2 baths, and it's priced at $199,000 with a monthly $403 Homeowners Association fee. Eligible applicants must be first-time homebuyers with income at or below 80% of the area median income, and they have to have less than $75,000 in assets. More information about the process is available on Housing Association Corporation's website. Finishing touches are still in the works before residents officially move in. One unit has a stubborn years-old stain on the original marble fireplace that Cisco has been brainstorming how to erase. But at the same time, Lindsay Weiss said embracing these imperfections keep the house authentic. "They're like battle scars," she said. Keeping it local as we move inside the paper, unemployment claims in Massachusetts increased. Initial filings for unemployment benefits in Massachusetts rose in recent data compared with a week prior, U.S. Department of Labor said on Thursday. New jobless claims, which is a proxy for layoffs, increased to 4,834 in the week ending April 5th. That's up from 4,276 the week before, the Labor Department said. U.S. unemployment claims rose to 223,000 last week. That's up 4,000 claims from 219,000 the week prior on a seasonally adjusted basis. Tennessee saw the largest percentage increase in weekly claims, with claims jumping by 95.3%, and Kentucky, meanwhile, saw the largest percentage drop in new claims, with claims dropping by 56%. From the Cape and Islands section, Yarmouth doubles down on stopping lobster sales at raucous hearing by Susan Vaughn. The Yarmouth Zoning Board of Appeals had an unusual night, April 10th, when the town hall hearing room was overflowing with loud supporters of lobsterman John Tolley. At one point during the meeting, a police officer was called in to calm the crowd, but stayed only briefly. The raucous crowd also shouted comments of support for two unrelated hearings on April 10th, but they didn't get much chance to add their opinions for Tolley's petition to continue selling lobsters from his home at 23 Iroquois Boulevard in West Yarmouth. "We're not sure we're going to allow you to proceed," Board Chair Sean Igoe said from a screen, where he joined the meeting via online connection. The audience protested loudly. Igoe referred to the last time Tolley appeared before the board on October 24th of 2024, saying it was for the same request after he was cited for a violation in August of 2024. The zoning regulations do not allow the same appeal within 2 years, he said. "We upheld the building commissioner last time," Igoe said. "Our position is we've already heard this repetitive petition." The rest of the board agreed with Igoe and quickly voted to uphold the building commissioner's decision and deny Tolley a variance on 5-0 votes. Tolley spelled Tolley. Retail sale of lobsters at a residence isn't protected as a pre-existing use or permissible accessory use, according to zoning regulations. To get a variance, an applicant would need to show a substantial hardship, the regulations state. Igoe told Tolley he can appeal the decision in Superior Court. The hearing was over in 15 minutes, but some of the audience continued to protest to board members who were in the room. Tolley said he will appeal the decision when he was called the day after the meeting. He said his lawyer, Jonathan Poloni, wasn't told about the 2-year ruling when he contacted Building Commissioner Mark Grills. Poloni tried to argue that Tolley's right to sell the lobsters from his home had been grandfathered in previously, and the board had brought it up at the October hearing. Poloni didn't get a chance to state Tolley's case when the board acted quickly and closed the hearing. Tolley's been selling lobsters from his home since 1975. His father sold from the same house also for nearly 30 years prior. The town allowed retail sales in a residential zone from 1942 to 1981, according to town records his lawyer found, Tolley said. He said he sold lobsters to a previous building commissioner, Forrest White, for several years. "I can sell any place on Route 28 because it's a business zone," Tolley said. "I like to sell from my house because it's convenient." In the other two cases at the zoning board, the crowd applauded the approval for a motel on Route 28 to house seasonal employees this summer, but showed their displeasure when a waiver for a child care business in a home was denied. On Mondays, in the Cape Cod Times, there's usually a photo shoot section by Steve Heslip, who's the staff photographer for the Cape Cod Times. People might ask, why are you reading about photography to the blind? And the answer is because he doesn't really just write about photography. He writes about the process and about more than that. He writes about life. Photo shoot. Turn around for better photos. Newton's third law of motion states for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. Sir Isaac's law has been around since the 1600s, so it is time-tested. On the surface, it makes sense in the world of physics, but in photojournalism? Photographing demonstrations can often encompass the third law. Two sides squaring off on opposing sides of an issue, often on opposite sides of the street. There's been no shortage of protests so far in 2025 and no signs of a let-up. Traffic rotaries have become the new town greens as gathering spots for these events. They offer high visibility and a captive audience as drivers queue up to round the circle. The logistics of getting a good camera angle involve safety concerns. Crossing busy roadways with a media credential hanging from your neck feels like an episode of Survivor. The airport rotary in Hyannis has been a popular sign-waving spot for years, and I've worked out a relatively safe way to get around the circle and into the middle if needed, but not recommended. When photographing crowded events, it's best to start at the edges and work towards the center, making eye contact with people being photographed. I always try to get names. This is time-consuming, but talking to people is what journalism is all about. Fast-moving events can be distracting to photograph. With so much chaos, it's hard to find a focus. Identify what's visually interesting and stick with it. Keep Newton's law in mind, action and reaction. Instead of centering all my attention on the protesters, I turn around and take in the view of drivers' responses, thumbs up or down, or even more aggressive finger gestures. I saw the dog looking out the backseat window in the photo above, and there's a little tiny dog's head with a child looking at a tablet closely. He describes, I saw the dog looking out the backseat window in the photo above, and when the vehicle got closer, it was joined by a child using a tablet to film the action outside, with the initials OMG, oh my God, across the back of the tablet. A photo with a built-in caption. Sometimes one just needs to turn around to find a good photo. There are no more local stories. There are no obituaries in today's Cape Cod Times of Monday, April 14th, and there are no sports stories that are local in today's Cape Cod Times. So we will move into the regional and national news. Tourists speak out about ICE detentions from the cover of today's Cape Cod Times. This is reported by Trevor Hughes and Lauren Villagran of USA Today. A British backpacker, a Harvard researcher, a Canadian actress, an Australian mixed martial arts coach, dozens of international college students. The Trump administration's sweeping immigration and visa crackdown has been ensnaring a class of people long accustomed to being welcomed with open arms into the United States. And these uncommon detainees are bringing new attention to the often harsh U.S. immigration and customs enforcement detention system, where people can be held without charge indefinitely, sometimes in shocking conditions or abruptly removed from the country. This type of treatment has long been the case in ICE detention, but the people held by the government often didn't have the resources, meaning the access, language, or middle-class expectations, to denounce the conditions. Now, with President Trump's crackdown, native English speakers, people with PhDs, and others are getting the word out to a broader public about a system they describe as arbitrary and punishing. It's insane how easily someone can take away your freedom, lock you in a federal prison without a clear reason. No explanation, no warning. Australian MMA coach Renato Subotic wrote in an Instagram post after being detained in early April. Just like that, you're treated like the worst criminal. Like the other detained travelers, Subotic said he was trying to enter the United States with a visa and was handcuffed after customs officers identified a paperwork problem. Instead of being refused entry to the U.S. and put on a flight back home, Subotic said he was taken to a chaotic federal detention center for 24 hours. Trump campaigned on tough new immigration enforcement, particularly targeting violent offenders in the U.S. without legal permission. But the crackdowns have swept up everyday foreign travelers and tourists too, resulting in detention for infractions that previously would have gotten a severe glare or a $500 fine. I believe in respecting the rules, but putting someone in federal prison over a missing detail in a visa application, Subotic wrote in his post, now I'm back to Australia. I'll speak with my lawyers. Something has to be done about the way I was treated. I hope this never happens to anybody else. USA Today asked ICE whether foreign travelers should expect to be detained on an infraction of customs or immigration law, and the agency didn't respond to a request for comment regarding its detention practices. Because immigration and visa violations are civil, not criminal matters, ICE detention is supposed to be non-punitive according to the agency's own guidelines, but conditions vary widely in the sprawling detention network that's overseen by ICE, which includes government-run and contracted facilities, said Deb Fleischaker, a former ICE official who served under the Biden administration and the first Trump administration. Legally, it is civil detention, not criminal detention, Fleischaker said, but by and large, people are treated like they're in jail. When the system gets overcrowded, conditions can deteriorate, she said. ICE held nearly 48,000 people in detention in early April, according to agency data. Last year, Congress provided funding for a daily average maximum of 41,500 immigration detention beds. Fleischaker said problems like overcrowding used to be detected and fixed by internal review systems, but the Trump administration recently eliminated two key oversight offices, the Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties and the Office of the Immigration Detention Ombudsman. Detention or kidnapping? Canadian entrepreneur-turned-actress Jasmine Mooney described an experience similar to Sobotchek's but far longer. She described her 12-day ICE detention in the Guardian newspaper as a kidnapping after she tried to enter the United States at the Mexican border as she'd done many times before. Legally, immigration officers couldn't send her back to Mexico because she's a Canadian citizen. But in years past, agents might have put her on a one-way flight to Vancouver, experts told USA Today. One minute I was in an immigration office talking to an officer about my work visa, which had been approved months before and allowed me, a Canadian, to work in the U.S., she wrote. The next, I was told to put my hands against the wall and patted down like a criminal before being sent to an ICE detention center without the chance to talk to a lawyer. British backpacker Rebecca Burke did chores for her U.S. host family. ICE detained her for 19 days, claiming she should have requested work permission, not a tourist visa, despite previously having been allowed in under the same circumstances. Burke said she was handcuffed, shackled, had her shoelaces cut off, and then discovered the ICE agent assigned to her case had gone on vacation while she was detained in a room with 100 other women. Harvard Medical School researcher Ksenia Petrova has remained in ICE detention for more than 7 weeks, with no end date in sight. The Russian native was returning from Paris to Boston Logan International Airport in February, with specimens for her lab's genetics research that custom officers said she failed to properly declare. She arrived with her J-1 work-study visa. She was in good standing and had never entered the country unlawfully. Typically, when a traveler fails to properly declare an import, customs officers confiscate the product, and sometimes they issue a fine. In Petrova's case, they withheld her visa. ICE sent her to a privately run Louisiana detention center, and they have refused to release her or allow her to return to Europe. Petrova said she told CBP officers she feared returning to Russia because of her pro-Ukrainian political activism. Her Harvard colleagues and 17 U.S. senators have urged ICE to release her. That would be my worst nightmare. Longtime immigration attorney Len Saunders called the Trump approach scorched earth. He said border agents and customs officers have long had discretion to let in someone whose paperwork isn't perfect, giving them a grace period if necessary. But Saunders also noted that the conditions and uncertainty that Mooney, Sobotchek, and others experienced reflect standard practice once someone's in the immigration detention system. He said there's typically a lack of urgency, especially because there aren't enough immigration judges to hold hearings swiftly. In criminal court, defendants are entitled by the Sixth Amendment to speedy prosecutions, but in immigration court, detainees can languish for weeks or months. As an immigrant to this country, That'd be my worst nightmare, ending up in one of those places, Saunders said. I feel sorry for these people. Inside Trump's deal with El Salvador is the final headline on the cover of today's Cape Cod Times, dated April 14th. U.S. paying $6 million to send deportees to a mega prison by Nelson Renteria in Tecoluca, El Salvador. Behind the high concrete walls of El Salvador's notorious mega prison, more than 250 Venezuelans deported in March from the U.S. remain locked up as President Donald Trump ramps up his mass deportations. As part of a deal reached between Salvadoran President Nayib Bukele and Trump, the United States is paying the Central American country $6 million to hold the Venezuelan deportees and others it claims are gang members. Bukele is scheduled to visit the White House April 14th to discuss further use of the giant terrorism confinement center known as CECOT, C-E-C-O-T, the largest detention facility in the Americas that can hold up to 40,000 prisoners for deportees from the United States. But the deportation deal is fraught with complications, as attorneys and relatives of many deportees deny they have gang ties. Battles are being fought over their rights to due process. Concerns are growing over the conditions inside CECOT. The United States deported more than 250 alleged members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua, along with 23 suspected MS-13 gang members and leaders, to El Salvador March 16th and March 31st. The U.S. government designated Tren de Aragua a foreign terrorist organization in January. For 137 of the accused gang deportees, the U.S. government cited the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, a rarely used wartime law, saying the men belonged to Tren de Aragua, but provided few details about their cases. A U.S. official said in a court filing that many of those 137 have no U.S. convictions, but nevertheless posed serious threats. The use of El Salvador to dump deportees is being fought in U.S. courts. The U.S. Supreme Court on April 10th ordered the administration to facilitate, quote-unquote, the return of Salvadoran Kilmar Abrego Garcia after he was sent to CECOT, despite an immigration court order against him being placed there due to the risk of persecution. Judges in Texas and New York on April 9th dealt twin blows to Trump's effort to revive deportations of alleged Venezuelan gang members under the Enemies Act after the Supreme Court ruled the administration could expel people under the rule. This marked victories for the American Civil Liberties Union, which is seeking to prevent further deportations of alleged gang members under the 18th century law. Family members, many of whom say those deported have no gang affiliation, are fearful about their fate. The Venezuelan prisoners who haven't committed any crimes in El Salvador and haven't been tried in local courts haven't been seen publicly since last month. No family visits are allowed at the mega prison, which human rights groups say is overcrowded with harsh conditions. Defense attorneys say details haven't been released about the prisoners' confinement, and they have not been able to communicate with them, despite international law giving them that right. From no point of view, based on the Universal Declaration of Human Rights itself, should any person be treated in this manner. Much less should they be in a detention center for immigration issues, said Salvadoran lawyer Jaime Ortega, head of a law firm handling the Venezuelans' case. A habeas corpus lawsuit that questions the legality of the detentions has been presented to El Salvador's Supreme Court in defense of 30 imprisoned Venezuelan citizens, and by extension of the rest of the detainees, Ortega said. During an April 4th visit to the sprawling CECOT complex, the Thomson Reuters Foundation witnessed unidentified inmates sitting in cells on metal bunks, dressed in white clothes with their heads shaved. The prisoners, who were not the alleged Venezuelan gang deportees, intently observed the procession of journalists who accompanied a guided tour by Costa Rican officials visiting El Salvador to evaluate the prison system. Some inmates could be seen undergoing medical checkups, doing physical exercise, or listening to religious talks about forgiveness and repentance. all under close watch by masked guards and riot gear-clad police officers. No authorization was provided to the media to speak to inmates or prison staff. El Salvador has become a key partner of the Trump administration in its deportation juggernaut. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has praised Bukele as not only the strongest security leader in our region, but also a great friend of the U.S. Rubio hailed the $6 million deal for El Salvador to house migrants, saying it will hold accused gang members in very good jails at a fair price that will also save our taxpayer dollars. Opened in 2023, located in an isolated rural area about an hour's drive from the capital, San Salvador, the mega prison also holds about 18,000 Salvadorans who had been detained in other prisons since March of 2022 under a state of emergency declared by Bukele to combat gang violence. Bukele's iron-fisted war against violent gangs has led to plummeting murder rates, and it's gained him popularity among many in El Salvador. But local and international human rights organizations have denounced the imprisonment of innocent Salvadorans with no gang ties for lacking due process or fair trials. CICOT has conditions of torture under which hundreds of Salvadorans have died under the regime, said David Morales, a lawyer at Cristosal, a group that defends rights in Central America. Our next headline, Doctor reports Trump is in excellent health, by Sibeli Mays Osterman of USA Today in Washington. President Donald Trump, who's 78 years old, remains in excellent health thanks to an active lifestyle, including frequent victories in golf events, the White House physician wrote in a memo released Sunday after Trump's annual physical exam. According to the results of the exam, which took several hours Friday, Trump's in good physical and mental health. His active lifestyle continues to contribute significantly to his well-being. U.S. Navy Captain Sean Barbadella, the physician to the president, wrote. Those activities include daily meetings, press appearances, and golf victories, Barbadella wrote. Barbadella, a former Navy doctor, was named Trump's official physician last month. At 6 feet 3 inches and 224 pounds, Trump is overweight, according to the Body Mass Index. Trump golfs frequently, but famously eats a fast food-heavy diet. During his first term in office, the White House physician recommended he try to eat fewer carbohydrates and fat and exercise more. Trump scored 30 out of 30 on the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. That's a test used to detect signs of dementia and cognitive impairment. Trump told reporters on Friday after taking the test, "I got every answer right." Trump told reporters he took a cognitive test because he wanted to be a little different from his predecessor, former President Joe Biden, who is now 82. Trump also sought to draw a contrast with Biden during his presidential campaign last year, portraying himself as younger and fitter. A disastrous debate performance from Biden raised questions about his acuity, ultimately forcing him to drop out of the presidential race and endorse Vice President Kamala Harris as the Democratic candidate. Biden's doctors repeatedly deemed him fit to serve, but several books published in recent months have raised questions about his mental fitness in his final months in the White House. Meanwhile, Trump will turn 79 in June. When he took office in January, Trump became the oldest president to be sworn in, 5 months older than Biden was when he was sworn in at 78 years and 2 months old in 2021. Trump, who survived an assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania during a 2024 election rally with a bullet grazing his ear, has scarring on the right ear from a gunshot wound, according to the memo. The report said his hearing was normal. Trump's campaign released a report after the assassination attempt last year concluding that the injuries were superficial. It went, I think, well. Every test you can imagine. I was there for a long time. The yearly physical, Trump told reporters aboard Air Force One on Friday after the exam. I think I did well. Barbadella's report also references Trump's history with COVID-19. Trump was hospitalized during a serious bout with the virus in October of 2020 during his run for re-election. It noted that Trump takes 2 medications to control cholesterol, rosuvastatin and ezetimibe. generic names of the branded drugs Crestor and Zetia, and uses a steroid cream known as mometasone to control rosacea, a condition that can cause redness in the face, as well as aspirin. It also mentions Trump has received all recommended vaccines. Trump has in the past spread debunked claims about links between vaccines and autism, often mentioned by his Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. Kennedy has also cast doubt on the safety and efficacy of vaccines during a large, ongoing U.S. measles outbreak, contrary to established science, but has also said the vaccine's the best way to prevent the virus's spread. Contributing to that report was Reuters. We'll move to Nation and World Briefs. When will Trump impose a smartphone tariff? Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick said April 13th that tariffs on smartphones, computers, and electronics would still come within months after President Donald Trump issued exemptions for the popular goods. On April 11th, the White House issued exemptions for tech products made in China from the extra 125% tariffs that Trump trained on all the country's imports to the U.S. In a Sunday interview on ABC this week, Lutnick said separate tariffs on the products were coming soon. They're exempt from the reciprocal tariffs, but they're included in the semiconductor tariffs, which are coming in probably a month or two, he told host Jonathan Karl, adding, "This is not a permanent sort of exemption." Lutnick said pharmaceutical products would also be hit with their own separate tariff rate to come within months. Plane carrying 6 crashes in open field near Copiague, New York. A plane carrying 6 people was involved in a fatal crash in upstate New York on April 12th, just days after a helicopter plummeted into the Hudson River. The Mitsubishi MU-2B was headed to Columbia County Airport in Hudson, New York, when it crashed in an open field near Copiague, a small town approximately 20 miles southeast of the airport, around 12:15 p.m. local time, the FAA said in a statement. Additional details about the number of fatalities or injuries were not immediately available. The incident is currently under investigation by the FAA and the National Transportation Safety Board. The Columbia County Sheriff's Office has also launched its own investigation. Court records. Former Abercrombie CEO is unfit for trial. Attorneys for former Abercrombie & Fitch CEO Michael Jeffries said he's unable to stand trial in a federal sex trafficking case because he has dementia. Federal prosecutors say Jeffries, who's 80 years old, and 2 other men transported young, aspiring male models to events around the world. An indictment says the models were coerced into having sex with Jeffries and his romantic partner, Matthew Smith, who's 61 years old. In a court filing April 10th, 2 forensic psychologists said Jeffries has Alzheimer's disease and Lewy body dementia and is suffering from residual effects of a traumatic brain injury. One of the psychologists said the conditions make him unable to recall key events, and he can't understand the charges against him or their legal consequences, so he can't participate in his legal defense, according to the records. His attorneys are asking the court to place Jeffries in state custody, hospitalizing him for treatment for 4 months to see if his condition improves. U.S. official says Saudi Arabia and the U.S. on a pathway to a civil nuclear deal in Riyadh. The United States and Saudi Arabia will sign a preliminary agreement to cooperate over the kingdom's ambitions to develop a civil nuclear industry. U.S. Energy Secretary Chris Wright told reporters in the Saudi capital, Riyadh, on April 13th. Wright, who had met with Saudi Energy Minister Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman earlier on April 13th, said Riyadh and Washington were on a pathway, quote-unquote, to reaching an agreement to work together to develop a Saudi civil nuclear program. Wright, on his first visit to the kingdom as secretary, as part of a tour of energy-producing Gulf states, said further details over a memorandum detailing the energy cooperation between Riyadh and Washington would come later this year. For a U.S. partnership and involvement in nuclear here, there will definitely be a 1-2-3 agreement. There's lots of ways to structure a deal that will accomplish both the Saudi objectives and the American objectives, he said. A so-called 123 agreement with Riyadh refers to Section 123 of the U.S. Atomic Energy Act of 1954 and is required to permit the U.S. government and American companies to work with entities in the kingdom to develop a civil nuclear industry. UK says looser food standards are off the menu in any U.S. deal. Britain will not relax its food safety standards as part of any deal to secure lower tariffs on its exports to the U.S., Business Minister Jonathan Reynolds said on April 13th. President Donald Trump has imposed 10% tariffs on most imports of British goods to the U.S. and a higher 25% rate on imports of cars, steel, and aluminum. Although the tariffs imposed on Britain are at the lower end of the U.S.'s scale, reflecting broadly balanced trade flows between the two countries, Reynolds said he still viewed the greater trade barriers as disappointing. Earlier this month, just after the tariffs were announced, Reynolds told the BBC it was not inaccurate to say the United States and Britain had agreed to the broad outline of a possible deal, though Trump hadn't seen it. However, there's been little sign of progress since, and last week Finance Minister Rachel Reeves said she intended to meet United States Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent shortly, quote unquote. Hong Kong's last major opposition party moves toward disbanding. Hong Kong's last remaining major opposition party took a key step toward disbanding itself April 13th after a special meeting approved arrangements to do so in the face of pressure from China, amid a national security crackdown. 5 senior members of the Democratic Party had earlier told Reuters that Chinese officials or middlemen had warned it in recent months to disband or face serious consequences, including possible arrests. The party, founded 3 years before Hong Kong's return to Chinese rule from Britain in 1997, has been the Asian financial hub's flagship opposition, uniting democratic forces to push Beijing on democratic reforms and to uphold freedoms. Party head Lo Kin-hei told reporters that 90% of 110 members had voted at an April 13th meeting for a 3-person committee to start making arrangements for disbandment, including resolving legal and accounting matters. After the panel completed its work, a final vote on dissolution would be held in coming months, Lowe added. Finalization of the move requires a majority vote of 75%. Pope makes a brief appearance after the Palm Sunday service in Vatican City. Pope Francis made a brief appearance in St. Peter's Square on April 13th at the end of a Palm Sunday service, greeting the crowds from his wheelchair as he continues to recover from double pneumonia. Happy Palm Sunday, happy Holy Week, the Pope said, before returning inside the Vatican, stopping occasionally to talk with the faithful, including a group of delighted nuns. Unlike April 6th, when he made his first public appearance since being discharged from the hospital 3 weeks ago, the Pope was not receiving oxygen via a small hose under his nose. Francis, who's 88 years old, was discharged from the hospital on March 23rd after spending 5 weeks being treated for the lung infection, which his doctor later said had nearly killed him. His medical team have urged him to take 2 months' rest, and the Pope initially remained out of view after returning home. However, in a sign that he might be feeling stronger, he has made 4 unannounced appearances in recent days and also briefly met Britain's King Charles and Queen Camilla. Our next headline, how tariffs may affect baby essentials. Industry urges Trump to make exemptions. The formula supply chain is somewhat centralized and fragile in the U.S. By Mary Walrath Holdridge of USA Today. Parenting presents its unique challenges, and the unpredictable changes in tariffs make it harder to budget for essential baby items. President Donald Trump's chaotic tariff switch-up has left many industries reeling, especially following his announcement April 9th of a 90-day pause on imposing target tariffs on more than 75 countries. A universal 10% tariff still applies during this period in some countries, such as China, currently saddled with a 145% import tariff, were excluded. As global markets attempt to make sense of the economic turmoil, so do consumers, including parents who already spend more than $29,000 a year per child, according to a recent report by LendingTree. From ensuring diapers, formula, and clothes that are ever-changing in size to proper nutrition and car seats, the costs add up quickly. And that's before the tariffs. As of April 11th, no exemptions for baby or children's products were outlined in any tariffs. In recent history, the 2022 Formula Act lifted tariffs on imported baby formula amid a nationwide shortage. Unless these items are excluded from tariffs, you could see prices increase very soon, though immediate shortages aren't expected, said a report by Baby Center that was shared with USA Today. The Juvenile Products Manufacturers Association, a nonprofit trade organization, sent a letter to the Trump Organization in late February asking that all juvenile products be explicitly excluded from the tariffs on Chinese imports. The results can be devastating when American families are forced to rely on second-hand or older products that don't meet current safety standards, the organization said. The death of even one American child due to unavailability of affordable life-saving baby products is too many. Baby formula. While prices will likely change, experts aren't expecting another mass shortage of baby formula. Larger manufacturers will likely find a way to absorb or spread the additional costs, though smaller producers might face a more challenging battle in keeping products stocked and prices stable. David Warwick, Executive Vice President at Overhaul, a supply chain risk management company, told Baby Center. However, people who rely on a specialized, imported formula because of dietary intolerances and allergies might be hit harder by the changes. Most of these specialized formulas are made in European countries, which, as of April 10th, are among the countries against which Trump hit pause on implementing tariffs. Imports from the European Union were set at 20% before Trump announced the 90-day delay, but the baseline 10% remains. Parents who rely on imported or specialty formula brands may feel the impact more acutely since those products are brought in at smaller volumes and already face higher distribution costs, Warwick told Baby Center. Tariffs only add to that. The formula supply chain is somewhat centralized and fragile in the U.S. because half of the country's formula supply is purchased annually by the Supplemental Nutritional Program for Women, Infants, and Children, also known as WIC, W-I-C. Tight restrictions on which brands and types can be bought have resulted in something of a monopolized sector. Parents felt the pain of this in 2022, when the shuttering of just one Abbott factory in Sturgis, Michigan due to contamination disrupted 20% of the entire nation's supply, resulting in a shortage that was only solved by the temporary removal of existing 17% tariffs to allow the mass import of baby formula primarily from Ireland, according to a U.S. International Trade Commission report. Before this, however, the United States exported more baby formula than it imported. From 2017 to 2021, its baby formula export volumes were 7 times higher than imports. Canada was the largest recipient, receiving 70% of U.S. exports on average during that time period. No diaper shortage is expected. Like with most products, made in the USA does not necessarily mean every component therein was sourced and manufactured in the country when it comes to diapers. Even when considering just the popular brands that often tout their made in the USA status, such as Huggies and Pampers, the equipment to make them, packaging, and the materials such as plastics might very well be imported, Warwick told Baby Center. Like with formula, larger manufacturers are more likely to find a way to distribute or absorb these costs, though it's yet to be seen if they will. Disposable diapers, for example, are often made with fibrous wood pulp or plant-based materials such as bamboo fiber. China, Vietnam, and India are the largest worldwide exporters of bamboo fiber, according to Volza import trade data, and the primary exporters to the U.S. Before the 90-day pause, products imported from Vietnam faced a 46% tariff, while those from India were set at 26%. China, of course, still had a 145% import tariff as of April 11th. The increased cost of importing raw materials used in manufacturing products like diapers drives the overall production price up, and in turn the cost is passed on to the consumer. The fortunate news is that a widespread shortage is not expected. Strollers and car seats. Where are they made? China. Car seats and high chairs might be disproportionately impacted, thanks to reliance on China for these products. As with formula, disruptions to the larger supply chain might significantly impact the cost and accessibility of strollers and car seats. Currently, juvenile products are heavily regulated by the Consumer Product Safety Commission, according to the letter sent to the Trump administration by JPMA. And the complex supply chain built around these standards would be interrupted by the tariffs. More than 40 members of Congress likewise appealed to Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick on April 1st, urging the administration to consider exemptions for baby and toddler products, specifically citing car seats, high chairs, strollers, and cribs. Citing Trump's promises of lower prices and Vice President J.D. Vance's touting of a pro-family agenda, the letter asked the second Trump administration to follow in the steps of the first, which exempted some of these goods from Section 301 tariffs in 2018. American families should not be forced to choose between their livelihoods and reliance on poor-quality baby gear, the letter from JPMA said. In addition, we are particularly sensitive to the cost of car seats because all 50 states have laws designed to protect children traveling in motor vehicles. Families should not have to pay more to comply with the laws that help keep their babies and toddlers safe. Our final story in today's Cape Cod Times, dated Monday, April 14th, company recalls lenses used in cataract surgery. Inflammatory eye reactions are reported, by Celine Martin of USA Today. Bausch & Lomb has recalled some artificial lenses used during cataract surgery due to reported complications, according to an announcement from the Canadian eye care company that was posted on the U.S. Food and Drug Administration's website. The company recalled all lots of its Envista Aspire, Envista Aspire Toric, Envista Envy, and Envista Envy Toric intraocular lenses. Also included are some Envista monofocal and Envista monofocal toric lenses, the company said. The company recalled the products after receiving an increased number of reports of toxic anterior segment syndrome. That's an inflammatory reaction of the anterior segment of the eye. The cause of the complications couldn't immediately be explained, Bausch & Lomb said in an announcement. Brett Saunders, chairman and CEO, said in the announcement that patient safety is the company's main concern. Surgeons and patients trust Bausch & Lomb, and I believe that this voluntary recall is the best thing we can do to honor that trust, Saunders said. An intraocular lens, also called an IOL, is a small artificial lens doctors surgically add to the eye, replacing a cataract patient's clouded natural lens, according to the American Academy of Ophthalmology. The lens bends light rays that enter the eye, helping patients to see, the Academy said. The intraocular lenses are made of silicone, acrylic, or other plastics and are coated in material to protect the eyes from the sun's ultraviolet rays. Similar to prescription glasses and contact lenses, intraocular lenses come in different strengths, the Academy said. According to the Academy, intraocular lenses function in different ways to address a range of vision issues. According to the company, all Envista TASS cases reported to Bausch & Lomb were treated quickly and improved. In no case did the lens have to be removed. And with that, we've come to the end of our reading of the Cape Cod Times for today, Monday, April 14th of 2025. This is your reader, Eric, saying be well, be safe, look after each other, and remember our veterans, especially those we've lost recently. Bye for now.